used to work at a McDonald's years ago, primarily as a cashier, where I took people's orders. I often worked late shifts, and there were quite a few nights when the restaurant stayed open until 2 a.m. Things would typically quiet down significantly around 8 p.m., and the rest of the night would be pretty slow. Sometimes on weekends or other random nights, it would get busy, but for the most part, it was quiet. One night, I was working until closing with a coworker named Gloria. She was a manager and had worked there longer than me, so she took care of the cooking while I handled the register. Around 10 p.m., it was just the two of us in the restaurant. A few customers came in here and there, but it remained relatively slow. As midnight rolled around, I was standing at the register when I noticed a man standing outside in the parking lot. He appeared to be staring inside, looking directly at me through the large windows. He had long hair and a beard, and he looked to be in his 30s. His presence made me uneasy, especially since it was late and the place was quiet. I watched him for a few moments, wondering what he was doing. I thought he might come inside, but he didn't. After about 30 seconds of standing still, just staring at me, I couldn't take it anymore and went to the back of the store to talk to Gloria. She was watching the TV in the kitchen, so I hung out with her for a minute to take my mind off things. When I went back to the front, the man was gone. I was relieved and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. A little while later, I helped a customer, gave them their food, and as they left, I saw the man standing outside again. He was back, staring at me through the window, just like before. This time, I went back to the kitchen to tell Gloria, but when we returned to the front, he was gone once again. I felt a little better, thinking he had left for good. However, as we were wrapping up for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me. As I was getting ready to leave, I looked out the window, and to my surprise, he was standing right behind my car, just staring at me again. I walked back to Gloria and pointed him out, hoping she would see what I was seeing. She confirmed that he was still there, standing in the parking lot, just staring. Neither of us wanted to confront him, so we waited a bit longer. Finally, the man casually walked away, and after another 10 minutes, we were able to lock up and head out. I was relieved to finally leave, but as I walked out to my car, I saw him again, this time standing farther away across the parking lot. I quickly got into my car, started it, and looked out the window. To my horror, he was still there, watching me from a distance. I quickly drove off, my heart racing, and thankfully I didn't see him again. By the time I worked my next shift, I had mostly forgotten about the man. But about a week or two later, when I was working again, I saw him once more. It was around midnight, and just like the first time, he was standing outside, staring at me. After a few moments, he turned and walked away. I didn't see him again for the rest of the night, and I thought that maybe I had just imagined it. But when my shift ended, and I was preparing to leave, I looked outside and saw the man once again, this time standing right behind my car. I didn't want to walk past him, so I told Gloria, and together we waited. After a minute, we opened the door and asked him to leave the property. He didn't respond but started walking toward us, and we quickly closed the door again. He tried to open the door, but of course it was locked. After a few moments, he walked away, and we quickly left the store, making sure to keep our distance. That was the last time I ever saw him, and I never worked at that McDonald's again. I don't know what his intentions were, but the way he would stare at me, standing alone in the parking lot, gave me a chill I'll never forget. I continued to work at that McDonald's for a while, and the strange man who had been lurking outside never returned, but his presence haunted me. Every time I worked a late shift, I found myself constantly looking out the window, half expecting to see him standing there, staring. The eerie feeling in my stomach lingered for weeks. It wasn't that I felt physically threatened. He never approached me or tried to make contact, but the way he would just stand there, motionless, watching me, was unsettling. The quiet nights became a bit less peaceful after that. I would try to focus on my duties, but my mind would wander. I often found myself glancing at the large windows, convinced I would see his face again. But nothing happened for the next few weeks, and eventually, I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that the man was just some random person passing by, and that I had blown things out of proportion. But then, one night, something happened that made everything worse. It was a typical slow night. Gloria and I were working the shift again, and by midnight, the place was dead quiet. I just finished helping a customer, and was standing near the register, sorting through receipts, when I looked out the window and saw someone walking into the parking lot. My heart dropped. It was the man. At first I thought it might be a coincidence, but when he walked closer to the window, I realized it was definitely him. His long hair and beard, that same haunting empty stare, he hadn't changed at all. He was walking across the parking lot as if he had a purpose, heading directly toward the McDonald's. I panicked. My first instinct was to go to the back, but I stopped myself. I didn't want to seem like I was afraid of him. I didn't want to seem weak in front of Gloria, who was the manager. She had always been tough, and I didn't want her to think I was overreacting. But the closer he got, the more I felt the cold sweat forming on the back of my neck. I quickly went into the back to tell Gloria. She was watching TV in the kitchen, and I told her the man was outside again, standing in the parking lot. Gloria walked over to the back door, peered out the window, and turned to me with an expression of concern. "Should we call the police?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with unease. Before I could respond, we saw him again. He was standing right in front of the window now, his face pressed against the glass, staring directly at us. It was as if he knew we were watching him. He didn't move for what felt like an eternity. I felt paralyzed, stuck in place, unable to move. I couldn't understand why he would do this. Why stand outside a McDonald's late at night just staring in? It didn't make sense. Finally, he stepped back from the window, and for a moment, I thought he was going to leave. But instead, he began to walk around the building, moving toward the back where we were. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear the footsteps getting closer, and then I saw him standing near the back door, his figure dark against the faint light of the parking lot. Gloria and I exchanged worried glances. I could tell she was considering calling the police, but she hesitated. She didn't want to overreact. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, the man reached out and tried to open the back door. The door was locked, of course, but the sound of him rattling the handle sent a jolt of fear through my body. He was trying to get inside. Gloria quickly grabbed the phone and dialed the non-emergency police number. I watched the man through the kitchen window as he continued to stand by the door. His figure was so still, so unnatural, and the longer I stared at him, the more I felt like I was losing control. He didn't leave, but after a few more minutes of standing there, he finally turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the parking lot. Gloria and I waited for the police to arrive, but the man never returned. They checked the area, but by the time they showed up, the parking lot was empty. They gave us the usual reassurance that they would keep an eye out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he would be back. The thought lingered in the back of my mind, creeping up every time I worked late. The weeks passed, and I did my best to ignore the anxiety that had crept into my routine. But then, one evening, I found myself working the night shift again, alone. Gloria had called in sick, and I was covering for her. It was the same scenario as the first time I'd seen the man. The place was empty, it was after midnight, and there were no customers. I was leaning against the counter just staring into space when I saw him again, just as I had the first time. He was standing in the parking lot, his face pressed against the window, just staring at me. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. It was as though time had stood still. I had hoped it would never happen again, but there he was, exactly where he had been before. I walked to the back and grabbed the phone, calling the police once more. But this time, as I spoke to the dispatcher, something shifted. The man didn't move. He didn't leave. He just stood there, his eyes locked with mine. The police didn't arrive in time. By the time they came to the McDonald's, the man was gone. I never saw him again after that night, but his presence still haunted me. And even now, years later, I can't help but feel the weight of those cold, empty eyes watching me in the dark.